The morning my wife opened her eyes and screamed. I knew that everything I believed for the past 7 years had been a lie, but I need to go back, way back. Because if I don't start from the beginning, none of this will make sense. And honestly, even when you hear the whole thing, you still might not believe it. I barely believe it myself, and I lived through every single day of it. My name is Glenn. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years driving a truck for a freight company out of Knoxville, Tennessee. Retired at 56 with a decent pension, a paid-off house on 2 acres, and a woman I loved more than anything on this earth. My wife, Diane. We married late. I was 40, she was 36. Both of us had given up on finding somebody. Then we met at a church potluck dinner, and I swear to you, the moment she laughed at something I said about the potato salad, I knew. Some people don't believe in that kind of thing. I didn't either, until it happened to me. Diane had a son from her first marriage, Mitchell. He was 14 when I came into the picture. His biological father had walked out when the boy was 3, moved to Oregon, and never sent a dime. So I stepped in. I didn't try to replace his father. I just tried to be steady, tried to be present. I helped him with his homework, taught him to change a tire, sat through his baseball games in the rain. And for a while it seemed like it was working. He called me Glenn, never Dad, and I was fine with that. I respected it. Mitchell grew up, moved out at 19, bounced around a few jobs. He wasn't a bad kid. At least, that's what I told myself for a long time. He was just restless, unfocused, always looking for the shortcut. But he'd come by for Thanksgiving, call his mother on her birthday, send a text on Christmas, enough to seem like he cared. When Diane turned 50, everything changed. She started getting headaches. Bad ones. The kind where she'd lie in a dark room for hours and I'd bring her water and she'd barely lift her head. Then the vision problem started. Blurry spots. Colors fading. She said it was like looking through a dirty window that kept getting dirtier. We went to Dr. Pham, our family doctor for 15 years. He referred us to a specialist in Knoxville. That specialist referred us to another one in Nashville. Tests, scans, more tests. They diagnosed her with a rare, degenerative condition of the optic nerve, progressive, irreversible. Within 8 months, my wife was completely blind. I won't lie to you. The first year was the hardest thing I've ever been through. And I include 2 tours in the Gulf in that statement. Not because of the work. I didn't mind the work. I'd wake up at 5:30, make her breakfast, help her to the bathroom, lay out her clothes, describe what was outside the window. I'd read to her in the evenings. I installed grab bars in every hallway. I memorized the layout of every room so I could guide her without hesitation. I did it because I loved her. That part was never hard. What was hard was watching her disappear. Diane had been a vivid woman. She painted watercolors. She grew tomatoes and sunflowers in the backyard. She noticed everything. The way light hit the kitchen counter in the afternoon, the exact shade of orange the maples turned in October. Losing her sight didn't just take her vision. It took her personality. She got quiet. Then, she got sad. Then she stopped talking most days, and I'd sit next to her on the couch and hold her hand and listen to the clock tick and wonder if this was what the rest of our lives would look like. Around year 2, I hired a home health aide. A woman named Julianne. She came recommended through an agency. Mid-30s, polite, seemed competent. She'd come 3 days a week to help with Diane's physical therapy, bathing, and meals while I ran errands or just sat on the porch for 20 minutes and tried to breathe. Having Julianne there was a relief. I trusted her. Diane seemed comfortable with her. Mitchell, to his credit, started coming around more after his mother went blind. Once a month at first, then every other week. He'd sit with Diane, talk to her, bring her audiobooks. He even started helping me with the yard. I was grateful. I told myself, see, the boy turned out okay after all. He just needed a reason to step up. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Mitchell and Julianne already knew each other. They'd been together for over a year before she ever walked through my front door. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Year 3, year 4, life settled into a rhythm. A sad rhythm, but a rhythm. I adjusted. Diane adjusted, sort of. She had good days where she'd smile and ask me to describe the garden, and bad days where she wouldn't eat. I took her to follow-up appointments every 6 months. Always the same specialist in Nashville, a Dr. Kinsey. Always the same news. No improvement. The damage was permanent. He'd adjust her medications, write new prescriptions, and send us home. I never questioned it. Why would I? He was the doctor. He had the degrees on his wall and the letters after his name. I was a truck driver. What did I know about optic nerve degeneration? Year 5, my pension got supplemented. I'd made some smart investments back in my 30s, mostly real estate. 2 rental properties in Maryville that I'd bought cheap and fixed up myself. Between the rent income, my pension, and the equity in our house, Diane and I were sitting on close to $700,000. Not rich, but comfortable. More than comfortable for East Tennessee. I mentioned this to Mitchell one evening because he'd asked about helping his mother set up a trust. Said he'd been reading about estate planning. Wanted to make sure Diane was protected in case something happened to me. I thought it was thoughtful. I sat at the kitchen table and walked him through our finances. Showed him the bank statements. Told him about the rental properties. Even mentioned the lockbox in the bedroom closet where I kept the deed to the house and our savings bonds. I handed him the map to everything we had, and I smiled while I did it. Year 6. A Tuesday in March. I remember because it had been raining for 3 days straight and the creek behind our property was running high. I was in the kitchen making Diane's lunch when Julianne came in through the back door. She was on her phone, texting someone. She didn't see me at first. I heard her whisper something. Just a fragment. He still doesn't know. Stop worrying. She looked up. Saw me. Her face went white for about half a second, and then she smiled and said she'd been talking to her sister about a surprise birthday party. I nodded, said something about the weather. Let it go. But I didn't let it go. Not really. That sentence burrowed into me like a splinter. He still doesn't know. Who didn't know what? I told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself that, after 6 years of caregiving, my mind was playing tricks. I almost convinced myself. Then, 2 weeks later, something happened that I'll never forget as long as I live. Diane had a fall. She tripped on the edge of the bathroom rug and hit her head on the tile floor. Not hard enough for stitches, but hard enough to scare me. I called 911. The paramedics checked her out, said she was fine, but recommended we take her to the ER just to be safe. We went to the University of Tennessee Medical Center in Knoxville. The ER doctor, a young woman named Dr. Anita Sandoval, examined Diane thoroughly. She checked her pupils, ran a basic neurological exam, and then she paused. She did the pupil test again. Then a third time. She asked me to step into the hallway. I'll hear her words in my head until the day I die. Mr. Hadley, she said, your wife's pupils are responding to light. Both of them, normally and consistently. I stared at her. I said, she's blind. She's been blind for almost 7 years. Dr. Sandoval looked at me with this expression I couldn't read. Part concern, part something else. She said, I'd like to run some additional tests. And Mr. Hadley, I think you should call the police. My knees almost gave out. I leaned against the wall and asked her what she meant. She said she couldn't be certain yet, but the preliminary signs suggested that Diane's blindness might not be caused by nerve degeneration at all, that the symptoms were more consistent with chronic chemical exposure. Poisoning. I felt the floor tilt under me. They admitted Diane overnight, ran blood panels, toxicology screens, an MRI. I sat in the plastic chair next to her bed and held her hand, and watched her sleep, and tried to make sense of what was happening. My mind kept circling back to one thought. Someone had been poisoning my wife. For 7 years. Someone close enough to do it consistently, carefully, without anyone noticing. The results came back the next morning. Dr. Sandoval sat me down in a small conference room with a neurologist and a hospital social worker. The neurologist explained that they'd found traces of a compound, a medication called methanol, being metabolized in Diane's system at levels far above anything accidental. Methanol, even in small repeated doses, can damage the optic nerve. Gradually, progressively, exactly mimicking a natural degenerative condition. Someone had been giving my wife methanol regularly for years. I called the police from the hospital lobby. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. 2 detectives came within the hour. I told them everything: the diagnosis, the home health aid, Mitchell's increased involvement, the finances I'd laid out on the kitchen table like a fool. The detectives asked me not to go home yet. They wanted to execute a search warrant first. I agreed. I sat in the hospital cafeteria for 4 hours drinking coffee I couldn't taste and staring at a wall. Here's what the police found. In Julianne's car, parked in a grocery store lot 2 miles from my house, they found a bottle of industrial-grade methanol hidden inside a compartment behind the spare tire. They also found her phone, which contained over 2,000 text messages between her and Mitchell, going back 3 years. The texts laid it all out. Every detail, every step of the plan. Mitchell and Julianne had been together since before Diane went blind. They'd met at a bar in Maryville. At some point, Mitchell told Julianne about his mother's finances, about the rental properties, about the old stepfather who kept everything in lockboxes and savings bonds like it was 1975. They hatched a plan. Julianne would get hired as Diane's aide. Mitchell would play the devoted son. They'd slowly poison Diane, keep her blind and dependent, and work on getting control of the finances. The text showed that Mitchell had been pressuring me to set up that trust for a reason. He wanted to be named as Diane's power of attorney. Once he had legal authority over her assets, the plan was to move Diane into a facility, sell the house, liquidate the rental properties, and disappear. They almost got away with it. The only reason they didn't was because Diane tripped on a bathroom rug on a rainy Tuesday in March. Mitchell was arrested at his apartment in Knoxville. He didn't resist. The detective told me later that when they read him his rights, he just sat on his couch and stared at the floor. Didn't say a word. Julianne was picked up the same afternoon at a gas station trying to leave town. She talked. She talked a lot. Tried to pin everything on Mitchell. Said he'd come up with the plan. He procured the methanol. He told her exactly how much to administer. The detective said she was crying so hard she could barely get the words out. I didn't care about her tears. There was one more person involved: Dr. Kinsey, the specialist in Nashville who'd been treating Diane for 6 years. The police investigated his connection, and what they found made me sick. Mitchell had been paying Kinsey $4,000 every 6 months, cash, to maintain the fake diagnosis. Kinsey knew Diane wasn't degenerating naturally. He knew she was being poisoned. He wrote the prescriptions anyway, adjusted the treatment plan anyway, looked me in the eye every 6 months, and told me my wife was incurable. Kinsey was arrested at his practice on a Thursday morning in front of his staff. He was charged with conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to aggravated assault. His medical license was revoked within 90 days. Mitchell was charged with attempted murder, poisoning, elder abuse, and financial exploitation. Julianne was charged as an accomplice on all counts. The trial took 11 months. I sat in that courtroom every single day. Mitchell's defense attorney tried to argue that the methanol exposure was accidental, that Julianne had been using cleaning products improperly. The jury didn't buy it for a second. 2,000 text messages are hard to explain away. Mitchell was sentenced to 22 years. No parole for 15. Julianne got 14 years. Kinsey got 12. I watched them get let out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Mitchell looked at me as he passed. For the first time in all those years, I saw something real in his eyes. Not remorse. Fear. The fear of a man who just realized that the shortcut led straight to a cage. I didn't feel satisfied. I thought I would. I'd imagined that moment for months. But standing there in that courtroom, all I felt was tired. Bone deep, soul deep tired. 7 years of tired. Now let me tell you about Diane. Once the methanol exposure stopped, her body started to heal. The neurologist said optic nerve damage from methanol can be partially reversible if the exposure is caught before total atrophy. Diane had been right on the edge. Another 6 months, maybe a year, and the damage would have been permanent for real. The recovery was slow, painful even. Her eyes were hypersensitive to light for weeks. She had to wear dark glasses indoors. Colors came back wrong at first, muddy and distorted, like looking through water. She described it as learning to see all over again. But she was seeing. The morning I mentioned at the beginning, the morning she opened her eyes and screamed, that was the morning she looked at me for the first time in almost 7 years. She screamed because she didn't recognize me. I'd aged. My hair had gone white. I'd lost weight. The man she remembered was 49. The man standing in front of her was 56 and looked 65. She reached up and touched my face and said, "Glenn?" And I said, "Yeah, sweetheart, it's me." And I sat on the edge of that hospital bed and cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child. Just sobbed. Couldn't stop. 7 years of holding it together, of being the strong one, of getting up at 5:30 and making breakfast and reading to her and pretending I wasn't falling apart, and it all came out in that sterile little room with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Diane cried too, but here's what broke my heart more than anything. She apologized. She said she was sorry for not knowing, sorry for trusting Julianne, sorry for not being able to see what was happening. I told her to stop. I told her none of this was her fault, and I meant it. But I'll be honest with you, there was a part of me, a small, ugly, exhausted part that was angry. Not at Diane, at myself, for missing the signs, for trusting Mitchell, for sitting at that kitchen table and handing over every piece of information they needed to destroy us. That anger took a long time to let go of. Some days I'm still working on it. 6 months after the trial ended, Diane's vision had recovered to about 60%. She could see faces, read large print, navigate the house without help. She'd never paint watercolors again. The fine detail was gone, but she could see the tomato plants in the backyard. She could see the maples turn orange in October. And on clear mornings, she'd sit on the porch with her coffee and just look at things. The sky, the trees, the creek. Just look. I'd sit next to her and we wouldn't say anything. Didn't need to. We sold the house in Maryville. Couldn't stay there. Too many ghosts in those hallways. We moved to a smaller place in Severill, closer to the mountains. Diane started volunteering at a community center, teaching basic art to kids. She couldn't do the fine work anymore, but she could guide little hands and show them how to mix colors, and she'd come home smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. People ask me sometimes if I've forgiven Mitchell. I tell them the truth. I don't know. Forgiveness is a word people throw around like it's simple, like it's a switch you flip. It's not. Some mornings I wake up and I think about that boy I taught to change a tire, and I feel something that might be close to forgiveness. Other mornings I think about the methanol and the text messages and the doctor who looked me in the eye and lied, and forgiveness feels about as far away as the moon. But here's what I do know. I know that 7 years of my life were stolen. 7 years of Diane's sight. 7 years of sunsets and gardens, and her face across the breakfast table. I can't get those back. No verdict, no sentence, no amount of justice gives me back a single day. What I got instead was the truth. And the truth, as much as it burned, set us free. Not in some dramatic, cinematic way, in a quiet way. In the way that Diane can look at me now and actually see me. In the way that I don't have to pretend anymore that everything is fine when it's not. In the way that I finally stopped carrying the weight of something I never understood. We're not the same people we were before. We couldn't be. But we're still here. Still together. Still sitting on the porch in the morning, drinking coffee, watching the mountains. Last week, Diane pointed at something in the garden. A single sunflower had come up on its own. We hadn't planted it. Must have been a seed from a bird or the wind. She said, "Look at that, Glenn. It found its way." I looked at her, at the lines around her eyes and the gray in her hair and the way the morning light caught her face. "Yeah," I said, "it did." If you've been through something like this, if someone you trusted turned your life inside out, I want you to know one thing. The truth doesn't always come when you want it. Sometimes it takes 7 years and a tripped bathroom rug and a young doctor who paid attention when nobody else did. But it comes. And when it does, you hold on to it. You hold on tight. Because the truth is the only thing they can't take from you.